They said the bluff repeats what it hears. Not echoes of rocks or gulls, but pieces of people. Names pulled from kitchens, arguments cut off mid-sentence, apologies folded into wind. One night, someone standing at the cliff heard their name called back to them. It sounded like the voice of someone they loved. Then, it answered.
Find somewhere dark. Put your headphones on. Listen closely now. Tonight's story is called The Echo Bluff. I'm Samnang. Do you feel that? The wind already knows our names.
Mara grew up with salt on her skin. She learned the shoreline the way some kids learn a song. Boots on peat, flashlights sweeping driftwood.
Her brother Jonah disappeared the winter before. One night he was just gone.
She volunteered to comb the coast. Teams with headlamps, radios, the small economy of search, coffee in a thermos, spare gloves, lists of places to check. The bluff was part of the work. It looked like any other stretch of rock and grass, until it sounded like something else. On a gray morning, Mara and 3 volunteers walked the crest where the cliff drops to the sea. The grass smelled of wet loam and old kelp. Waves undercut the stone like a slow machine. Gulls argued over foam. Then one of them stopped, as if someone had stepped on her shadow. She told Mara. It said my name, not loud, like it was thinking it over.
Do you feel that? They laughed at first.
But the laugh died when the bluff kept going. It replayed a private argument, the exact line the woman had snapped 2 nights before. How could the wind know that?
People offered everyday explanations. Pockets of rock that focus sound, temperature inversions, an old radio carried by the tide. Gulls, someone muttered. They left, but Mara lay awake, replaying that line like a wound. She told herself, it's the mind filling the silence. Over the next weeks, the sound came back like tide. Names called quietly from the headlands at odd hours. A retired teacher heard a confession he had only ever said to himself. A fisherman heard his old friend's jeer. People began leaving small things on cairns. A cigarette, a button, a photograph. Objects meant for the sea or for memory. Mara became a listener for other listeners. She started a notebook. Times, words, who heard what. The map grew. The pattern pointed to a jagged bend of cliff locals began calling Echo Bluff. Most calls arrived at the margin between day and night, when wind dropped, and then, as if embarrassed, decided to speak. Names led the list, then fragments, I forgive you, and once, a child's laugh no one alive claimed. Recordings began to surface. Some were nothing but hiss and wave, others held shape. One recording, 37 seconds long, starts with wind, and at 0:18, a voice says, Jonah, so plain, some people wept when they heard it. Scientists mapped rock strata that can focus sound. That explains technical oddities. It doesn't explain why a private apology, whispered once in a kitchen, would replay on a cliff to a stranger. Word spread. Search teams began staying later. They left candles near cairns and ran handheld recorders until the batteries died. Some nights the files were empty. Other nights, when they played them back under sodium streetlights, voices were there. Names, half-arguments, soft apologies, snatches people swore they'd never spoken aloud. The bluff became a collection of returned things, memories, phrasing, tone. People treated it like evidence. Others treated it like temptation.
Then Jonah's name came to Mara on a windless afternoon. She was alone, scanning tide pools, thinking of posters and report forms, when a syllable landed, soft, terribly familiar. Mara. It had his rough cadence. The world shrunk to the sound.
She answered before thinking, Jonah?
Her voice became hope. The answer came back. Not a map, not a fact, but the shape of his laugh, a half apology he'd used to soften arguments. It sounded like him because Mara needed it to be him. This is where things change.
People who'd been skeptical began to listen differently. The father who had lost his daughter arrived with a lantern and a look that didn't belong to a volunteer. He told Mara the bluff had called her name at midnight, and he had followed the sound as if it were a map. People do strange things when the world offers an answer that might be real.
Mara stepped closer to the lip than she ever had. Not to surrender, she said, but to find out. Her flashlight cut a circle of yellow across peat and brome. The voices gathered like a tide. Snatches first, then sentences that fit the ache in her chest. Jonah, this time with impatience, like the bluff was teasing her for taking so long. She walked toward it. The bluff didn't give coordinates. It mirrored desire. Questions came back like pebbles. Why did you stop calling? Did you leave me on purpose? The replies weren't facts. They were temptation. Words shaped to pull someone forward. When a person's need met that shaping, they moved. Slowly at first, then with something like hunger. That night, a small team followed a voice into the dark. Flashlights cut and missed. The cliff underfoot was damp and slick. Voices layered, tender, mocking, coaxing. A phone later showed a file loops, name, accusation, promise, silence. Someone shouted they'd seen a shape slip between rocks. Mara ran. Her heart felt like a frantic drum. They found footprints at the lip. Small, erratic. A scarf snagged on bramble. A radio with the batteries drained. A folded note, like an offering. Jonas things? The answers were messy. Some called it proof the bluff lured people. Others called it ritual and grief. Mara watched the sea swallow light and felt close to an explanation she'd never hold. In the months after, the town split. Some avoided the bluff. Others couldn't stay away. Mara kept the notebook. Scientists remapped rock faces. A folklorist traced echoes in old songs. A quiet priest told a reporter the bluff had always been a place people speak to what they miss. None of it fit cleanly. Evidence and longing braided together until you couldn't tell which was which.
Years later, a grainy clip leaked. Wind, then a voice, so close it felt private. The single name in that file broke people who had been there. Some said trickery. Others called it proof that places can learn the pattern of our speech and imitate it with terrible generosity. For Mara, the recording was a mirror. How much truth was desire, and how much lay beyond her wanting.
What matters isn't proving the bluff as an agent. What matters is what happens when a landscape becomes a repository for longing. People lean into sound the way moths lean into light. If the world can hand you the shape of what you miss, you will follow it, even if following is dangerous. The bluff remembers who followed. The town remembers who didn't come back. The ledger includes bodies, and the calm most of us take for granted. Quirius.
Months after the searches and the arguments, Mara stood at the edge again. The tide was out, wind low. A small noise rose, not a name, just a hum like someone burning the edge of toast in the next room. She closed her eyes and remembered Jonah making coffee and humming as he burned the edges. She smiled, and then she stepped back. Maybe that was small. Maybe it was everything.
Years on, the bluff still talks. A tourist once said she heard her name called on a marked path, and afterward could not open her suitcase without thinking someone had reached inside. People still leave small things against the wind. Locals still bend their heads and listen. Mara still goes sometimes, not to find Jonah, but to remember that some wounds never seal, and that sometimes the wild is only pretending to help.
If you ever stand at a cliff and hear your name called back to you, remember this. The sound may be shaped like what you miss. It may wear the voice you loved. It may be honest, or it may be a trick woven from physics and grief. Either way, it asks for a price. Your footsteps toward the edge. The night remembers.
If you're still here, it means the story followed you to the end. Take a breath. Look around your room. Make sure everything is where you left it. I'm Samnang.